Mr. Rosenthal, thank you very much for coming, to this interview. It's been 1.5 years since you have been working in Armenia as ADB Armenia's resident mission country director, and it's quite a challenge, it seems to me. And resident mission in Armenia has started, I think your organization has started in Armenia from 2005. It's a lot of time, and you approved 25 loans in a total amount of more than 1 billion, and 24 technical assistance grants, and in total amount of 15.2 million. And this is quite, impressive, but we don't hear from you and a lot. What are the ADB's goal in Armenia, and what is your strategy, please?
Harry, first off, thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today. ADB turns 50 years old this year, and Armenia has been a member since 2005, as you just pointed out. And in that time, we have financed about $1.3 billion of assistance across many sectors. Our strategy as an organization is the reduction of poverty across the Asia-Pacific region. And for us, Armenia is in the western part of that Asia region. And we're very pleased about our partnership with Armenia. Our strategy here to achieve that poverty reduction goal is to work with the government and with the private sector to have a more resilient and enduring process of development and growth. And for us, that means linking what is a relatively small country with regional markets and with global markets. It means making a transition from public sector-led growth to private sector-led growth, and the type of growth that benefits all Armenians, not just a few.
And it seems to me that's your mission, to help the countries to fight the poverty, right? And why are you doing it? What's the, the mission? And there are a lot of Asian countries that are member of this, your organization, and they're very different from each other. One is very democratic, the other one maybe not necessarily is democratic. How you unite these countries around this mission?
ADB has 67 member countries. 48 of them are in the Asia-Pacific region. And Armenia, while not the newest member, is one of the newest. What unites all the countries, which are clients of ADB, is a common desire to reach a mature level of development, a type of development where citizens have access to basic services. You may be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. ADB is very much subscribing to those goals, and we work with our clients to ensure that they're achieved. But ADB's comparative advantage is increasingly in infrastructure and in promoting the role of the private sector to bring expertise and to bring financing to the private sector. Armenia is considered to be now a lower middle income country. To maintain that status and move forward, it's very important that it continue to work toward unblocking bottlenecks in infrastructure, and perhaps we'll get a chance to talk about some of those, and improving basic human services like education and health.
So are there such sectors in Armenia that are a priority for your organizations, and how you decide the priorities? And also the other question is, there are a lot of countries, if decision is taken, how the process works. For example, is this consensus-based, decision-making process? We just don't know much about your organization. Please be.
So every country has its own situation, its own needs, its own history, which shape its priorities. And for this reason, ADB works on the basis of 5-year country partnership strategies in each of the countries in which it's working. And we do that here. And the current strategy goes from 2014 to 2018. And that's developed in cooperation with the government, and it also involves consultations with private sector and civil society groups. Everyone has their views on what that strategy should focus on, but the current strategy in Armenia is to promote resilient growth by investing in infrastructure to connect the country better with the region, and to invest in human resources to ensure that that growth benefit everyone.
And you have projects, a lot of projects in Armenia. Can you just give us some details about your project? And do you think that public is aware of these projects or not? I think, to my opinion, the public has no idea in some cases about your very good projects that you are doing in villages, you know, in the regions. Please.
So first I want to point out that ADB is a financier. I like to say that there's no such thing as an ADB project. We support the government and we support the private sector who are responsible for implementing the projects. And ADB's role is one of financier and provider of technical assistance. Now what that means in the case of projects, and I'll come to exactly the type of projects that we're financing here, it means that there are certain requirements that our partners have to follow in terms of procurement, in terms of environmental safeguards, social safeguards. For example, if land acquisition is required to build a road, there are ADB standards, ADB requirements that the government has to follow. Now, ADB is known mainly in Armenia for our support for road projects. And I know that recently there's been a lot of attention given to the North-South Road project. And I hope that we have a chance to talk about that today. But in addition to these, we're supporting transport infrastructure in and around Yerevan. We have a wonderful project that is helping the government pay for the reconstruction and renovation of the most vulnerable schools to ensure that they are seismically resilient. That's a high priority for a country that went through a very terrible earthquake in 1988. We also provide some financing for women-owned and women-managed SMEs. In fact, over the last few years, through that assistance, about 1,700 of these SMEs have benefited. 4 out of 5 of those are women-owned or managed. And there are other projects also that we are doing.
But yes, you are financier of this project, but you, of course, they have to present, first of all, the project, that you have to look, you have to study whether this is good project or bad project. How you identify those?
So I mentioned earlier about the country partnership strategy. That covers a 5-year period. Now that does not per se identify specific projects. Every year, however, we set out with the government an operations plan for the coming 3 years that does identify specific projects. And one of the nice things about the disclosure policy of the ADB is that those plans are available on our website for anyone to see, and I would encourage your viewers to check out our website. It includes a lot of information, including all of the project documents for those projects that we're financing here in Armenia. So it's open,
it's there, so anyone can go and study.
That's right.
How much money you spend and how.
It has the description of the projects and how much is either being financed for ongoing projects or what is indicative for future planned projects. That's right. We also have evaluation reports. We have independent evaluation department at our headquarters which does evaluations of some completed projects, and all of our projects get a completion report by the staff who are responsible for overseeing them.
So now let's talk about the North-South Road Corridor Investment Program, and this is a project that's very controversial among, different groups in Armenia, including civic society and opposition, politicians. And please, first of all, explain ADB decided to provide a loan for construction of this road, and what was the amount of the loan provided by your bank? And we know that European Investment Bank and others also are helping this project. And please be specific about your help, your part of the.
Let me start with some historic perspective on this road corridor, because that's what it really is. It's a road corridor stretching about 550 kilometers from the northern border with Georgia to the southern border with Iran. This is a pathway, is a passage that has been used for hundreds or even thousands of years. And since independence in 1991, it has always featured as a priority of the government to improve it, because maintaining that road, increasing its capacity, is extremely important for a landlocked country. Now, ADB's assistance began with the approval of something we call a multi-tranche financing facility. That's a lot of jargon, but what it means is an arrangement, an agreement between Asian Development Bank and the government of Armenia for ADB to make available certain funds over a relatively long period, up to 10 years in this case, for an undertaking that requires multiple loans. We call each of those loans a tranche or slice. So to date, we've approved 3 of those tranches, and the works under the first tranche have already been completed. Many of your viewers will be familiar with, and in fact will be regular users of the sections of road that go from Yerevan to Artashat in the south, and from near Yerevan's border to Ashtarak.
It's very good road. It's a very good highway. I had a chance to drive through, but it's very small portion.
I'm glad that you know the section of road. I too am a user of these roads. In fact, I had the pleasure of driving to Artashat on the weekend, and indeed now one can go non-stop along this section.
It's so different from other roads.
That's right, and because it's a concrete road, and this was a very deliberate choice that the government made. It has a long life and relatively lower need for maintenance, at least in the first few years. The average life of a concrete road is about 30 years versus asphalt of about 5 to 10 years. Now, it is a relatively short section so far, so let me tell you about what's going on with the other sections.
Yeah, please, yes, go ahead, and because, there's a lot of talk about corruption, about this project, and civil society, opposition, everybody is criticizing. There's money laundering accusations, and even some say that your organization is involved in money laundering. Please go ahead and explain these things.
Sure.
And clarify for us.
And I'm looking forward to answering that. But before I do, let me tell your viewers about an update of what's going on now. As some of them may know, from Ashtarak to Tallinn and Lanjik, there are ongoing works. This is what we call the Tranche 2 and Tranche 3 works. That's an additional 60 kilometers. By the end of this year, we're expecting 20 to 25 to be completed. Our partners in the Ministry of Transportation and its Transport Implementation Unit are doing a terrific job. It's a very challenging set of works, and we're hoping that by the end of 2019, we'll see that work completed. In addition, there's ongoing work from Lanjik on to Gumri, which is being financed by our partners, the European Investment Bank. So I think that citizens of Armenia are going to see that work completed. Now that's just a couple of sections, and I know that there is a lot more of the north-south corridor that hasn't yet been completed. But I want to come to your question about corruption.
Yes, please. That's I think you have to be very open about this, and I believe that you're doing a great job, but please.
As I said earlier, ADB is a financier, and as part of that financing deal, whether it's with the government or whether it's with private sector, there are a number of requirements that our clients have to follow carefully. And those include safeguards, important concrete measures to guard against abuse of funds, to guard against corruption, and to ensure that any corruption where there is evidence can be reported easily and can be investigated. I want to point out just a couple of examples of the many layers of oversight that ADB provides. First off, even when a loan is being finalized, being negotiated with one of our clients, in this case the government, there is a lot of attention paid to ADB's anti-corruption policy. This requires, in fact, makes it a duty of anybody with knowledge of corruption to report that to us. And we have a dedicated integrity unit in our headquarters which actively investigates allegations of corruption.
Can we say that this case is being sort of looked at?
Currently, Harry, there's been no concrete evidence of corruption. I know there's been talk about it in the press and on social media, and of course if there is any report, we will investigate that. And our website includes information about how to report corruption. During the course of implementation, the government does regular reviews, the ADB does regular reviews, and there's an annual audited report of project accounts. Payments made to contractors have to be approved by ADB. We have special oversight at the end of a project by our independent evaluation department as well. So there are many layers, and this is something that we deal with not just in this country, but across all of our developing member countries.
So now the other thing, that the loan, the amount of 500 million was provided in 2009, right? But however, until now, only 31 kilometers have been commissioned up to this date. And if the program advances in this rate, it will take some 100 years before this project is completed. Well, how can you answer to this criticism, please?
I think we can all agree that 100 years is far too many for the completion of this project. Let's talk numbers. The entire north-south corridor is over 550 kilometers, 556 to be exact, with its current alignment. The ADB is financing so far 31 completed kilometers and then an additional 60 kilometers from Ashtarak to Lanjik. And that would be completed at the end of 2019. Now there's sometimes some confusion because that multi-tranche financing facility that I mentioned earlier is for $500 million. However, we make loans as the project proceeds in those sections. So what that means is that the first section was a $60 million loan. The second section is being financed by a $170 million loan, and the third by a $100 million loan. So altogether, I think if my math is right, that's $330 million. So as of yet, we still haven't seen the remaining $170 million used. And of the 330, only about 200 have been utilized so far. Now, on a per kilometer basis, the 31 kilometers that are completed is estimated to have cost $2 million per kilometer. That's actually at the low end of this type of road. If you look at other examples of it.
Civic society would say, no, I mean, critics would say it's 6 million, not 2 million. But the government, says, no, it's not 6 million, it's 2 million. So now,
so the math is actually pretty simple on that first tranche. 31 kilometers divided into $60 million. So that's more or less $2 million per kilometer, including the design, including the supervision of the project. Now, tranches 2 and 3, we don't yet know because they're ongoing and they haven't used the remaining financial resources.
Forgive me, do I understand correctly that the money is already been transferred to the government? How and we don't know if they use the money or not?
Oh no, we know, Harry, that they've used the money for this, and I'll tell you why. When ADB makes what we call disbursements on the loan, and we only do that on the basis of certified completed works, those payments are made actually directly to contractors for any substantive sum. And we verify that it's the correct bank account and the correct amounts. So it's not a situation where Armenia takes a loan of 100 million or 500 million and the next day ADB disperses all of that money and we look the other direction. No, that's not at all how it works. We have very strict systems to ensure that the payments are made to the right people, the right companies at the right time and in the right amount.
So there's also, you know, some talk that, you know, maybe the money is already spent, all this 500. What are you going to say about this? No.
So the second and third sections we are projecting will cost about $3.5 million per kilometer. Now compare that to some roads in the region which have cost as much as $8 million per kilometer. It very much depends, the cost very much depends on factors like the type of terrain and how much land acquisition is required. Now, the remaining section, about 350 kilometers from Artashat to Megri, and then also the incomplete section from Gyumri to Bavra at the border with Georgia. Right now, there are not concrete plans underway to start that work. And ADB has not yet been asked to finance that work. The government has a lot of priorities and it's going to have to weigh that completion of the North-South corridor with investments that they need to make in healthcare, in education, in other urban services, for example. Now, I think when it does come to considering the remainder of the North-South corridor, the government needs to look carefully at its technical options. What type of road does it need to build? Should it be 4 lanes or 2 lanes or something in between? Should it be concrete or should it be asphalt? What's appropriate? And second, it also needs to look at options to get some help from the private sector. Some other countries have been successful in partnering through PPPs or public-private partnerships with the private sector, applying tolls in some roads in their countries to help defray or reduce the overall cost of building a road. I don't think that's a magic bullet for this north-south road corridor, but it is something that the government should look into.
And also, what do you think, this north-south, I mean, this government spent a lot of money, okay, and a lot of money has been spent, a lot of talk about this project. And when we can see the end of this project?
Not 100 years. Look, Harry, I think that depends on how we define the project. We throw around these words, they mean different things to different people. The fact is very simple. There's 550 kilometers of roadway to upgrade to a level which can handle the sort of traffic that would make Armenia an attractive corridor for regional, for international traffic. That's not going to be done overnight. And those investments have to be weighed against the benefits and costs of competing investments. And I would never urge the government to rush into completing those remaining 350 kilometers.
And what's your future plans in Armenia? Do you have anything specific to say now, or it's secret?
Not at all. In fact, our approach is the opposite of secretive, Harry. We are always talking to our partners in the government, in the private sector, and increasingly in civil society.
You know, the reason why I'm saying this, I'm sorry, because the government is not that open as you might think. You know, they are not always talking about these projects, but you know, you say you're open, please go ahead. And
sure. So up until now, ADB's partnership with Armenia has been defined by an emphasis on addressing the infrastructure bottlenecks. You know, I've talked about some of our support for small and medium enterprises, for reinforcing the schools that are most vulnerable. But by volume, most of what we're doing is assisting the government with financing and technical advice in transport, in urban services, in energy, and in water supply. We expect to continue that type of assistance for the highest priority infrastructure going forward, but also to increasingly focus on the maintenance and operation of those assets. It's no good to invest millions in improved roadways and water supply if it's not operated and used in an efficient way that benefits everyone. So that's an increasing focus of ours. Also going forward, it's our view that the most important resource, the people of Armenia, has to become an increasing priority. And for us, that means education and health. Unless education is reoriented toward the 21st century economy, not last century's economy, this country will not be able to compete. Unless the population is healthy, has access to state-of-the-art health care, it will not be able to compete. It will not be a livable country, one which lives up to its full potential.
And now I have two questions. First of all, the corruption is a huge concern in the society, and a lot of people are talking about that. A lot of international organizations are doing something, trying at least to help the government or to help the civic society, you know, to fight this problem. And how much is how concerned you are about this problem?
Corruption is a high priority for Asian Development Bank, and that's why we have a dedicated unit, we have a dedicated policy, and it features in all of our loan agreements with all of our member countries. You know, corruption isn't important just because we think it's a bad thing inherently. Corruption has a real cost on the development of a country. If I'm an investor considering investing in Armenia, perhaps for a new business to provide better health care or education, I'm going to look carefully at how the judiciary works. I'm going to look carefully at how my precious investment dollars will be protected in case of a dispute. These are really important drivers for investment, and increasingly we're focusing on the role that private sector is playing. So for us, it's not just about corruption for its own sake in the public sector, it's about the impact that it has on the driver of the economy, the private sector.
Are you optimistic about Armenia's future?
I'm very.
And you have confidence in this government?
I'm very optimistic, and yes, I not only have confidence in this government, I want to...
have you met the Prime Minister?
I have. I've met the Prime Minister.
What's your impression?
I'm very, very impressed with his ability to focus on the priorities. And his team, I've worked in a number of countries, Harry, and coordination among development partners and the dialogue between development partners and the government is really important. And I must say, I don't think I've seen a stronger example of that type of coordination and communication. So it's very clear for us what the priorities of this government are. It's very clear what role ADB is playing and what we can bring to the table. It doesn't make sense for ADB to work in Armenia and bring what everybody else is bringing. We've got to find, Harry, what ADB can add to the recipe. And for us, that so far has been to help the government finance its highest priority infrastructure in large part. Going forward, I'm optimistic because this Prime Minister and his team understand the need to turn those investments over the last decade into improved services, improved service quality, not just for a few Armenians, but for all Armenians. They understand the role that technology is playing going forward, and they're giving it a lot of attention. They understand the importance of investing in people. There is so much conversation at the moment about education. This is a country, this is a people that place so much value on education. Every Armenian family understands that value. And these are some of the reasons that I'm optimistic about the future of Armenia. I'm optimistic about the value that ADB can bring. I hope that we can continue to be a relevant partner here for years to come.
You feel comfortable in this country, living here, residing?
I do. I love it. I'm very fortunate to have lived in a number of countries as I've worked for ADB. Every one is wonderful, of course, in its own way. I've learned from every place that I've worked, and that process continues here. But I must say, the food, the countryside, the hospitality, it's all wonderful. And I had the pleasure recently of welcoming the new World Bank country manager, and the first thing I told her is how lucky she is to be here in Armenia. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. It was very nice to
Thank
have
you so much,
here.
Harry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.